One. We'll have a look down. You have to understand how the genre. Welcome to the Come Up.
Welcome to the Come Up. My name is Matt, and on this episode, a conversation with stand-up comedian and storyteller, even though she would hate me saying that, Janine Harouni. Janine has a really fascinating backstory, origin story, and we talk a little bit about in this episode, but we also talk about comedy as an art form and how it's changed with social media in the past 2, 5, 10 years. We do talk about politics and how she has navigated having vastly different political views than her parents. And we talk about the process of writing her first special, which is now streaming in full on YouTube, and this new special, Manouche, which is coming to New York at the Soho Playhouse, December 3rd to the 21st, which I cannot wait to see. Janine is warm and smart and funny, obviously, and I just had a really wonderful time getting to talk to her. And I think you'll find this conversation both entertaining and also insightful. So, without further ado, here is my conversation with Janine Harouni. I'm always so excited to talk to people that do stand-up, comedians, because I am fascinated by the art form. I just think it is kind of insane, the vulnerability that it takes to be able to go on stage and be like, look at me, laugh at me, I am funny. So can you tell me your like stand-up origin story and your relationship with like the confidence around getting on stage and being funny?
It comes from a deep-seated insecurity. There is no comedian on the planet who feels like their parents are proud of them. Do you know what I mean? Like, in order to get up and be like, look at me, you guys think this is funny? I think you have to have a very, very low self-esteem, but high self-confidence. It's a rare combination of low self-esteem, high self-confidence. I started as an actor. I live in London now. I moved here to go to drama school in London, and I thought I was going to be like a very serious Shakespeare actor. And when I graduated, I got cast straight away in a West End show in a very serious drama. It was a dramatic adaptation of George Orwell's 1984. And I was playing Julia, the love interest. And I thought, like, this is it. I'm going to be a very serious actor. And then I did like 300 shows or something like that. And it was so boring. It's just every day, the same thing. And also I found it so weird pretending that the whole idea of a fourth wall is so strange when you actually think about it. It was very weird to pretend that they weren't there because, especially when you do a drama, funny things happen. One time we did a matinee and it was all school kids that came to the show. There's like a really like animalistic sex scene, and then it immediately cuts to a blackout, and then the lights come up and our clothes are kind of half off. And we got a standing ovation from all these teenagers. So we're supposed to be completely serious. And I was absolutely cracking up on stage, trying to do anything, like drinking water, trying to hide it. And I thought, I don't think this is my world. I think I should be doing comedy and trying to make people laugh. So I went from the West End to doing open mic comedy, which I don't know if you've ever had the absolute misfortune to go and see an open mic comedy show. It's pretty grim. You sit there for 3 hours and watch comedian after comedian absolutely eat shit, and you're sweating because you're terrible at comedy still. And then you go up, then you bomb, and then you go home and you didn't get paid. And you had to buy drinks while you were there. So I did that for maybe 2 years while I started working on my own solo show. And then I brought that show to the Edinburgh Fringe, and it did very well. It got filmed as a special for Amazon and available now on YouTube. And it's weirdly become incredibly timely because it's about how my parents are Trump supporters and how I got hit by a car, paralyzed my leg, and had to move back home with them while we weren't on speaking terms, and how we had to kind of bridge the political differences that we had in order for me to learn to walk again. I'd been out for my friend's 21st birthday. None of us were drinking. We had a sober driver, and she got a flat tire, so we pulled over in the shoulder, and there was a slight curve in the shoulder. And my friend was on the phone with her boyfriend trying to explain to him where we were and ask him if he could come and help change the tire. And I put my hand out the window and I said, someone will see there's just 3 girls in the car and they'll pull over and they'll help us. And as soon as I finished that sentence, we got rear-ended at 70 miles an hour because a woman who was coming home late from work, she worked in a hospital. So she was doing one of those, ridiculously long shifts, fell asleep at the wheel, we think, and veered into the shoulder thinking that we were another lane of traffic. And everybody else in the car was okay, but I didn't know why at the time, but I couldn't move my legs. And then I realized I'm pinned in the car. And so I was in the car for maybe 15, 20 minutes before the police turned up. And then the hottest fireman I've ever seen. Because I don't know if you know this, there's this thing where when someone rescues you, I think they've done studies on it, but you perceive them as much more attractive than they are because you're in such a vulnerable position.
But this guy was actually hot. But
well,
this was
firemen are also just hot. So
right.
It's hard to know. But there was like 3 of them, and they were the most like Staten Island, New York, sexiest firemen I've ever seen. And they were like, and there I was like trying to, like I'm bleeding.
Blood, yeah, right.
Yeah. And they cut the car off me and pulled me out. And went to the hospital. And I think when they put me on the stretcher is when I realized like my leg was the wrong way round. I'd completely dislocated my hip. And then my mom turned up because I called my parents while I was in the car because I thought I was going to die.
Right.
And my mom they weren't far. They got there. And the first thing my like Brooklyn-born New York mother said to me, she sees me covered in blood, leg mangled on a stretcher with a neck brace. And she goes, were any of you girls drinking? Like she wanted to lecture me immediately.
It was your fault.
Yeah.
I'm from the North Shore of Chicago, so I understand that very well. I think it's like sort of same but different.
Yeah.
So you move in with your parents who had a totally different political viewpoint than you. I'm curious, like, if having immediate family with opposing political viewpoints has changed the way that you think about or the way that you view people on the other side of the political spectrum, just as a whole?
First off, I just want to say I don't have any answers for any of this, and when I wrote the show, I didn't want to write a show that was answering the problem of the division in America. I just wanted to write a show that was sort of the most accurate depiction of the problem, which is there are people that you love that believe that have vastly different political views than you do. And if you were to see what those were written down on a piece of paper, you'd think this is someone I'd never want to spend 2 minutes with. And yet you love them more than anything because they're your family. And I was really wrestling with the fact that my dad and mom are 2 of the most generous, caring, loving people I've ever met. They volunteer in soup kitchens. My mom has completely uprooted her life to come and live with me for the past 2 months to help out with our baby that's just been born because my husband got a job abroad. I mean, they would do anything for their family. They would do anything for anyone. They're just lovely people. But they love Trump and they voted for Trump and they voted for him again this election. And it's not easy. It's not easy to sit with that. And so I wrote the show to try and, give people a little bit of hope that I think the division that we're all feeling, I think the world isn't as bad as we think it is when we look at stuff online.
Yeah, 2 things can be true at once, right? Like you can love someone and they can have a different political viewpoint than you.
And I also think that they can still be a good person. Do you know what I mean? I don't agree with everything that they think, but I still understand that their intentions aren't bad,
Yeah. I imagine writing a piece about that, or even with that as a thread through it, is healing in some way, is helpful in some way in processing that.
I think the healing thing is laughing about it. I think there are lots of hypocrisies that I mean, I'm not a perfect person at all. And I think that in this special, I tried to show my shortcomings and my parents' shortcomings, because I think that's the thing that just unites us as human beings, is we're not perfect, And I think we have much
Absolutely.
more in common than we do different. So I don't know. I wrote the show because it was just plaguing my mind, and I put it out online hoping that it wouldn't become relevant again, but it has. Yeah.
Well, and obviously you can see the relevance in the way that people respond on social media too. Like the clips. I mean, obviously we live in a new world. Even 5 years ago, comedy is different, then
Hugely.
than it is now.
Hugely, yeah.
With social media, there seems to be this like craving for escapism, maybe is the word I'm looking for. That like, I do want to sit on TikTok for 2 hours and just scroll away. And I do want to find things that make me laugh. And I do want to find things that I can just kind of like turn off that part of my brain, even for a small part of time. And it's why, listen, it's part of the reason why part of the reason I love theater and I love comedy, because I do get to go in and I like having my beliefs challenged, but I also get to go in and enjoy something for a short
Yeah.
period of time with a group of other people that, regardless of what our belief systems are, we're all sharing an experience in a singular moment.
That's what I love about comedy, because there's a visceral response to comedy that is so uniting. You can't help what you laugh at. You think something's funny, you laugh, regardless of whatever you believe, whoever you are outside of that room. And it is such a unifying thing. And that's the exact reason that I love doing stand-up every night.
And like you said, it's immediate. You're getting immediate feedback. Whereas in the theater, I guess you get applause sometimes, but like there definitely is this feeling of like, how did that go?
Yeah.
But with comedy,
Yeah, you know when it goes good, and you really know when it goes bad.
Right, exactly.
The immediate feedback is not always great, but
So
yeah.
I know you're doing the show here for a couple weeks, the new show here for a couple weeks, but I saw you're also doing a couple nights at Union Hall.
Yeah.
You're working on new material too.
Yeah. Well, I've been touring this show for 2 years now. So I wrote it before I had my son. I wrote it while I was pregnant. So much has happened since then. So I'm kind of itching to write a new show, and I think I'm ready to kind of hang up the towel on this one. Yeah, and move on to the next. So yeah, I'm also doing 2 shows at Union Hall.
Can you talk to me about how your writing process has changed from the first show to Manouche and now, like moving forward? Like, is it the kind of thing that your phone is full of notes that are overflowing, or do you sit down and dedicate time to like sit and write out jokes, Jerry Seinfeld style?
It's a combination of both. It's the main thing, and it's the hard thing about stand up, is that you can really only do it by doing it. So you do have to just step off the ledge and get up on stage and say stuff. You can't sit down and write an hour of material and then think, well, that's 70% there.
Right.
I mean,
you just don't know.
You write 5 minutes of material, and I'd say you can keep some, at best, 1 minute of that, because 4 minutes of it isn't going to work or isn't clear. So it is, I always imagine it as, first you build all the bricks, and then you take those bricks, because I do narrative stand up. So then you take those bricks and build the house. But the jokes are the bricks and the house is the narrative, And no matter what, it's always hard. Whenever you have to clear the slate and start over, it's never easy. It's always hard. And that's kind of what I love and hate about it, because it definitely always keeps you on your toes, but it also is so painful when it's backhanded. So painful. Especially for me, because I write about really personal stuff. The show was about a car accident I was in and my relationship with my parents. And this new show, Manouche, that I'm doing is about pregnancy loss and my grandmother, who was a singer, a Lebanese singer, who we lost, and the director of my show who died very young, 43, halfway through making the show.
I want to talk about Adam a little bit. I'd love to hear about your relationship with him. And, you know, everyone that talks about him, everyone I've ever heard say anything about him, just has only glowing things to say about him as a collaborator, but also about him as a human being. So I would love to hear you talk about him a little bit.
He was just the best. He was just the smartest person I'd ever met. I met him because I did a comedy course at Soho Theatre in London, which is the theater that he worked. He was the associate director for years at. And he came in, he was hungover. He was wearing like a crisp shirt, clearly didn't want to be there, like within, you know, slightly hungover. And was like, had a very, very frank way of speaking, which is not, and he was English, and that's not the English way. English people are very, very polite. I think New Yorkers are much more direct. We value.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You don't think so?
No, of course I do. I'm
so
kidding. So
much. It's crazy. Yeah. Time is money. And so if you're not being direct and honest about what it is you need and want, you're wasting my time, you know? And he was the most New York person I'd ever met, and he'd never even been to New York. And I mean, he was cutting people down. Like one after one, comics were coming up, and he was just like, well, that's just not funny what you're doing. You know, like he was. And I got up and we had a huge argument. He said this bit that I was doing wasn't going to work. And I'm like, it works. And he was like, it doesn't. And then he said, you're not scared of me. And I said, no, should I be? And he was like, some people are scared of me. And I was like, oh. And then afterwards, people told me who he was, and I was scared of him. He had directed 2 of the most beautiful shows that I'd seen at the Edinburgh Fringe, including Alex Edelman's Just for Us, which did a big long run on Broadway. And I'd seen them that summer, those 2 shows. And so I sent him a very like lame email, like just as like, I'm writing a show and I love your work, and I'd love, you know, to work with you if you had any, you know, if there was any. And he like immediately wrote back and was like, I think you're good and I like you, and why don't you come in and we'll sit down. And that's how it started. Yeah.
And you guys just had a loving collaboration from there.
Yeah. He the room that I'm sitting in was, when me and my husband, this is so lame, when me and my husband like moved into this place, we were like, this will be the room that we can sit down and have drinks with Adam in, you know. We're like, we'll get a record player in here, and because he was like a very sophisticated, you know, alcoholic, and no, yeah, he was just the best. He was always there for you if you needed him for anything, always on call, and like fiercely smart, fiercely funny, and just died way too young. Like just a huge loss to comedy in general, because he was a genius.
Yeah. It feels like, I don't know if you feel this way, but from an outside perspective, it feels like there has been a shift in the last, I don't know, 2, 5, 10 years towards narrative comedy. And I'm thinking of, I mean, certainly Alex and the fact that special, I mean, he won a Tony, and then now HBO.
He won an Emmy. He just won an Emmy.
Holy shit, yeah. That's right. I think he even was like, what the fuck? And I look at someone like Mike too, Mike Birbiglia, and I know that he's a big inspiration for you too. And how his sort of fame, whatever that word is, has grown in the last 2, 5, 10 years.
I'm sure Mike Birbiglia will really appreciate you putting his fame in quotes.
Fame, yeah, right. I wonder like what your take on why that's happening. You know, I mean, there certainly is going to be a place for stand-ups that are doing, you know, joke, Mitch Hedberg, set up punch. But this narrative thing seems to really be catching in a way that I feel like it hasn't in the past.
Yeah, that is a great question, and something that I've thought about a lot, because you're right. I do think that we are starting to see a real shift towards narrative stand-up. And I hesitate to call it storytelling, because that sounds,
I know,
shit. Like that just sounds so shit, you know? I like the idea of calling it narrative stand-up, because it still is stand-up. I mean, if you take any bit out of Alex's show, it would be brilliant stand-up that he could do in a club. And I think
Yeah.
that is really important because it should first and foremost be funny. But I think the reason that it's leaning towards more narrative is because of the internet. I think, in the 90s, 80s, and 90s, people were doing observational comedy, and that still exists. But
Yeah.
good luck trying to do that for a long time, because the minute you have an observation about something, you go online, there's 15 memes about it already, and somebody's made a TikTok about it. I think that's the place for observational comedy now. And stand-up is a place where it's an art form that lasts for an hour or so. And so I think that if you can fill that hour with a story, a narrative, that gives it a real sense of place and time, that is that there's a reason that it lasts for that long. Whereas with just observational stand-up, you can just get it as small clips.
Yeah.
And I think not only is it leaning more towards narrative, because not everybody who does stand-up is narrative, obviously. I think it's leaning more towards personal.
Yeah.
You'll see a lot of specials come out where people are really getting personal and talking about their childhood, their parents, their family lives. And I think part of that is because that's so much more timeless, than anything you can observe and throw online. I mean, the cycle is so fast. Even 3 years ago, I felt like if I post something online, it would go, if something went viral, it would go viral for a week. And now I feel like it only goes viral for a day. The cycle
Really?
is so fast. Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, people just want new stuff. And everybody's online all the time, post-pandemic.
Yeah.
And just to say, I do think there's also a place for that. If that's the kind of stand-up that you like or that you do, I think, God, when I see somebody do that really well, I can't understand how they can do that. And the people who put out that kind of content over and over and over again every week, I'm amazed by.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah, I know.
To churn that out, like that amount of, also like to come up with that many ideas. That's the other piece too. I'm like, I don't think that fast. The other type of comedy that I'm finding myself being pulled towards is, it's interesting. It's sort of on the other end of the spectrum from narrative. It's like full clown, Natalie Palama. Like,
yeah.
yes, like I this sort of on the edge, risky. There's this feeling of like, what is going to happen?
Yeah.
That I find myself like really drawn towards, because I don't know, I want to like live on the edge a little bit. Yeah, right, exactly.
Oh, I love Natalie. She's so cool. I've done a few shows with her, and I did one where she did this like character that's a mermaid, and she does like I guess it's called bouffon. It's like kind of chaotic clowning. But
Yeah.
she was this mermaid who gets legs, and the way she gets legs is she peels off her fins that she's wearing. And Natalie just did it as it would be, where she would have nothing on underneath. So she's just walking around completely naked from the waist down. And then she's like, she just played it completely straight. And she was like, what are these? And it was her toes. And she's like, what's this? It was her knees. And then she's like, what is that? And it was her vagina. And then she asked someone in the audience to give her a mirror, and they gave her their phone. So she took a picture on a stranger's phone of her own vagina on stage in front of like 300 people. And I watched it from the wings and thought it was the coolest thing ever. And then she came backstage and she never put pants on. She was naked backstage the whole rest of the show. Yeah. And just walking around. And she was just like, I think we're going to go for a hike tomorrow if you want to join us for a hike. I'm like, put some pants on. She's so cool.
Yeah, I just like seeing, it feels like comedy is opening up in a way that it wasn't. I don't know, when I was a kid, I probably wasn't even that aware of comedy at that point, but it's been really interesting to sort of see the evolution, especially in the age of social media. How is your relationship with it?
I'm currently, my new thing that I'm trying to keep in mind is like the comments are not for me. You know what I mean? I would never finish a set or do a show and then go out in the audience and like secretly find out what everybody thought of it. And
Right.
even then, those people have like consented to be there. They've paid. Presumably something about your show has drawn them there. So they're maybe interested in the kind of stuff that you do. Whereas comments online, it's just being served out randomly to people. And I mean, whoa, there's a lot of crazy people out there. And I mean, people talk about coming up through the clubs in like the 90s as being so tough and they had to endure like hecklers and drunk people and all that. Try reading 2,000 comments about yourself. Like,
Try reading 3 comments about yourself. What do you mean? Like, what?
wild. So now I try as hard as I can to not look at what they say. Because even the nice ones, the problem is even when people say nice things, it kind of draws you in. But if you believe the people who say nice things, then you have to believe the people who say terrible things. And so I think it's better to just be like, I'm putting it out there and it's not for me anymore. It's just people can watch it, they can comment. And if I do see a mean comment come up, I just think, just feed the algorithm, baby. You're going to pay my mortgage. Just feed
Thank
the
you.
algorithm, get the views up. That's fine.
Do you notice a difference between audiences over there and audiences over here?
Oh, yeah. I love living in the UK and I love British people. And I think they're so smart. Like as a whole, I think they're really intelligent. But for the love of God, they don't laugh out loud. It's wild to me. Americans know how to have a good time, you know? So
Well, they want to have a
anytime-
good time too.
Yeah, I know. And they need a good time right now. Anytime I do a show in the UK, it feels a little bit like working out with weights on. You know what I mean? Because you go out there and you have to be like, oh, this has got to be the best version of this joke, and this all has to piece together and tied together in a nice way. Because British audiences, and they're very snobby about the British sense of humor. And so if you're an outsider coming in, they're a bit like, well, this better be funny, you know? So then when I go to the States, it's so nice because people love laughing, they love interacting, and they're there to have a good time. And it feels like you've taken the weight vest off. You've done the work, you've taken the weight vest off, and now you're there to just have fun, which is nice.
Well, I'm excited for you. I'm excited that you're going to get to do the show for an extended period of time,
I
for like a little
know.
bit of a run. That'll be
Yeah.
interesting and different.
Yeah. I've never done it I've never done this show for more than 3 times in one city. So I'm doing it for 3 weeks in New York. So yeah.
Well, I'm excited for you to be here, and I can't wait to see the show. I'm so excited, and I thank you for taking the time to do this. I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you you've done so much research. It was so nice talking to you.